But what we haven't talked about is the human capital side. And that, for many businesses, is their key asset. So we know that governments have boundaries. We know that there are borders, and that people have to travel back and forth. Sometimes they have to work in different countries. How do we do this? And that's the purview of immigration law, which is what Jennifer does. And so let's see, we just kind of walk through her. So here's some information about Jennifer. She has offices in Newport Beach, in Beverly Hills, and in San Diego. And the legal disclaimer is that this is not legal advice, and especially coming from me, because I am not an immigration expert at all. I'm just trying to help out. So what we're going to talk about today is what to consider when we're sending our staffs to work across borders, things on the employee side to make a smooth transition abroad, different options under the immigration laws for importing talent into the United States, the paperwork that's needed in terms of the immigration laws, the timeline, and also for employment, and some resource partners to consider when you're sending your employees back and forth across borders. So with the question of moving employees across borders, we need to look at certain things, and Jennifer recommends we look at whether your product or service will be well received abroad, the costs of entering the new market in terms of time, money, personnel, and other resources, any new skills, cultural understanding, language that your employees are going to need to learn, because sometimes we need to provide actually classes for them to be able to succeed. Working with the local government and staff, making sure that they've paid attention to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act from before. And then the expansion and transfer of knowledge and experience within the company. How do we take this body of new knowledge and make it accessible and available to everybody who needs to have it within the company? There are different options that are available, and a lot of it has to do with the amount of money that you want to pay to get something done, the amount of time that you want to wait before you receive a particular visa, looking at the families that cross borders, because when you send your employee to work in a different country, you're not just sending them, you're sending their spouses, you're sending the children, and so there's a whole gamut of things that you need to consider, because you're uplifting someone from a life here in the United States and trying to replicate it overseas. And as an employer, it's going to be your responsibility, and it's going to be healthier for your company to make sure that your employee has everything that they need in terms of network and resources available to it. Language and cultural barriers we've talked about already. Consider sending them to courses to learn some things before they make their move. The cost of relocation and services that will help them with relocating a household is important. And of course, there are tax issues that come up. And also, I would say on the employment side, there are payroll issues that come up. And there are certain payroll companies that specialize in helping to make payroll if you've got employees in different parts of the world. But if you haven't thought about those things, how they participate, for example, in benefit plans that are geared for local employees, things like that, you may get into trouble down the road. There's variation in the employment laws and the HR regulations that are required for your employees that work overseas. And if you're placing them there and you are the employer of record, you're responsible for that. And sometimes it can be quite surprising. For example, I remember when everybody was hiring people in China because they thought that the low-wage environment was better for them economically in the company. But when you actually get into China and you look at their employment laws, some of their laws are as specific as California. And people were shocked to find out that you have to treat your employees in a certain way over there. There are rights that employees have. The same in Mexico and other places. So you really have to understand what it is you're doing before you decide that you're going to send somebody over to do that. And of course, the other things we've talked about, the benefits, vacation, working hours, medical. What do you do if an employee gets sick while they're living in a different country? Those kinds of things. Cost of living differences between here and there. Maybe child care, that type of employee support. Security is a big one because it can be very difficult. I had a client probably 10, 15 years ago down in San Diego that was in the electric vehicle manufacturing business, and they had a maquila across the border. And so they brought in a Mexican national to come up here to run the maquila operation, and he'd have to go back and forth across the border. And when there were cartel concerns, he said, I'm not doing it anymore. And they really had to figure out a way to handle security issues. I've seen that there are companies that have special insurance policies for their CEOs because people would go to certain countries and they'd be kidnapped, and so they needed an insurance policy to pay off the ransom for somebody, just like if they ransom your computer at the office. So a lot of things to think about. Transportation, having a foreign driver's license in the country. Are they going to be able to get around? How are you going to ship supplies back and forth to them that may be necessary for their employment? So in bringing talent into the United States, our system of immigration is a patchwork of visas. Visas are the permits that the U.S. government gives to people who are foreign nationals that are looking for permission to come into the United States. And depending on what type of visa is applied for, they can study, but they can't work, or they can work, or they can only stay for a limited period of time, or they can make multiple entries back and forth and go back home and come back. They're all different. And as you can see, it's a combination of letters and numbers that look at the different types of visas. And each combination of letter and numbers has its own type of restrictions and its own special characteristics that are just for there. And sometimes, like for example, number 6 is a visa just for citizens of Canada and Mexico. Number 7 is only for Australian citizens. So some visas are specific to a country based on treaties that have been negotiated with that country, and some pertain to all foreigners, like the B visas and the H visas. So just she's given us a kind of a commentary on some of the specifics of the visas that are used. The B1 and B2 visas are visitor visas. They're for people who are traveling over here for basically tourism, for recreation and personal travel. The purpose of the trip must be to enter the United States for that type of purpose, and the visit must be for a specific period of time, which must be limited. And you may not earn any income during your visit to the United States with these B visas. Some people get confused and they think the B visa is the business visa and you can do business while you're here, but you can't. It's strictly recreational or touristic. The L visas, she says, are the most popular for intra-company transfers. It enables a U.S. employer to transfer an executive or manager from one of its affiliated foreign offices back into one of its offices in the United States. So that employee can either be foreign or American. If they're American, they come in on their normal passport. If they're foreign, then they have to acquire one of these visas. And you have to show that the applicant has worked for the company outside the U.S. for at least one continuous year out of the last 3 years. So it might have been only 3 years ago, but if he worked for a continuous year 3 years ago, then he qualifies. 4 years ago, they don't qualify. They can come in to establish a new office for a maximum of a year. All other qualified employees come in for an initial 3-year stay, and then you have the ability to renew these L1 visas up for 2 extensions to a maximum of 7 years. There's no cap on availability. That means that they don't have quotas like some of the other visas. Anybody that is eligible for one can obtain one, and there's no application deadline. You can apply anytime that you need it. The L1B visa enables the U.S. employer to transfer a professional employee that has specialized knowledge. It's from one of its affiliated foreign offices to an office in the U.S. or to establish a new office. So you remember there has been a lot of talk in the political world about merit-based visas, whether somebody should be entitled to come in based on the merit that they offer or the specialization that they have. And that's to protect Americans from having certain jobs being taken away by foreign employees that would come in. So that's why they look at that specialized knowledge. And there's a variety of things that they have to put into their application to prove that up. They can come in to establish a new office for a period of 1 year. And otherwise, the initial stay is 3 years, and they can renew up to a maximum of 5 years total, up to 2 years. They're 1-year renewals after that. The eligibility is for foreign workers in specialty occupations that require theoretical or technical expertise in specialized fields. So they need either a bachelor's degree from a U.S. university or the foreign equivalent of that. They can come in on the H-1B, they can come in for 3 years and renew it once so that it's maximum of 6 years. This is the one that has a quota. There's a 65,000 person cap. The first 20,000 are for master's degree level individuals or higher, so postgraduate, that are exempt from the cap. And then everybody else has to at least have that bachelor's. You apply during a period of the year which begins on April 1st. In order to make the application for an H-1B visa, the employee must have a firm offer. So the company is responsible, and they're going to tell the government that they will be responsible for that employee, that foreign employee, financially responsible for the entire time that they're here in the United States. And with that job offer, then they can get this H-1B, and if they stay in the United States and they don't violate the terms of the visa, then they can become eligible to receive a green card. And this is the particular visa that operates by lottery. Because there are so many people from all over the world that want this visa, it's not kind of first come, first serve, but you put your name in, and then they have a lottery, and if your name is chosen, it's like being drafted. You get your visa. So she says that in 2020, USCIS, which of course is the government agency that manages the immigration laws, received 201,011 requests or applications for a total of 78,200 visas. So you had a less than 38% chance of winning that lottery in 2020. Specialty visas can be issued for individual countries, as we said. Again, these are negotiated treaties between the United States State Department and the diplomatic corps of the foreign country. Chile and Singapore are 2 countries that qualify for these special H-1B1 visas. Citizens in specialty occupations that require theoretical or technical expertise in specialized fields. So the requirements to qualify for these specialty visas are the same. They need to have relevant work experience and a high school diploma, so the bachelor's requirement is dropped a bit. Applicants may not intend to permanently reside in the United States, and they have to demonstrate that they have a lack of that intent. How do you demonstrate that? Well, typically you show that you're leaving your family, you're leaving your valuables, you're leaving your life back home, you're coming in just for this job, you've got a job offer that's for that period of time that doesn't provide for renewals. And so it's an initial 1-year term, but that can be renewed in certain circumstances. And the availability of these specialty visas is 1,400 for Chileans and 5,400 for Singaporeans. And there's no deadline, and they make the filing through their consulate in the United States, or the U.S. consulate over there. The TN visa is for NAFTA countries. Of course, NAFTA now has been replaced by the new Canada-Mexico treaty. It permits qualified Canadian and Mexican citizens to seek temporary entry into the United States to engage in business activities, any business activities in any profession. Applies to accountants, engineers, lawyers, pharmacists, scientists, teachers, graphic designers, and a whole other list. And she's given you the website to see the list of qualified professions. Canadian citizens are generally eligible for admission as non-immigrants even without a visa, and Canadians may establish eligibility at the time they seek admission to the U.S. by presenting the required documentation to a Customs and Border Protection officer at a port of entry. So they might do it right at the ferry or right at the bridge where they cross over into the United States. And to establish eligibility, it might be that job offer letter or a contract, something that shows that they are coming here for a specific position. To use the TN visa, the Canadian or Mexican has to show the proof of their citizenship, usually an identity card or a birth certificate or something that proves the citizenship that they're coming from, because some people will go to those countries to try to use that as an application to springboard into the U.S., and that's not permitted. They must have an offer letter from the employer. They have to show the credentials, the high school graduation and the other credentials that we talked about. There are fees that have to be paid. And then Mexican citizens, in addition to the TN visa, they must obtain an additional visa of some sort. The initial period of stay is up to 3 years, and then they can renew that every 3 years for an indefinite period of time. But they do have to show the intent to return to the home country. So they don't enter with the intention of staying here. And they can apply in advance either through the USCIS or on the Canadian side, right at the Canadian border. Another country-specific visa is the E3 visa, which is for Australian citizens. And it's particularly for Australians who are coming here to work temporarily in a specialty occupation. It's a 2-year visa, but that can be renewed for additional periods. There are 10,500 visas issued annually, and there's no deadline. The requirements to receive this visa are a legitimate offer of employment in the U.S. They must have a job in a specialty occupation. So, for example, we have a new client that we've taken on, which is an Australian company that's making medical-grade collagen from sheep in Australia, as opposed to bovine collagen, which is the typical collagen. And they find that it's got some superior things. So they are going to be using these E3 visas to be able to bring people here that have knowledge about the use and the care and the sale of medical-grade collagen. And that would be an example of this visa. Temporary stay, and it's necessary for a license or other official permission to practice in the specialty occupation. So, for example, if our client were going to be providing medical advice, they'd have to be licensed by a California medical board, one of the boards, to be able to do that. Even if they're licensed back home, they have to be qualified by the licensing board here in the United States. The J1 visa is a work and study visa, and it's based on visitor exchanges in a variety of categories. And you pay a provider to sponsor you in the exchange, such as a student exchange. It's program specific, so it depends on the type of exchange, and it has potential extensions. For example, with in the STEM degree program, your period here is 12 to 36 months. There's no cap on availability, there's no deadline or timing for making the application. You may have to return home for 2 years in certain categories before you can apply for another type of visa to come back. And it requires a third-party sponsor to sponsor you and make sure that you're going to be taken care of while you're here in this country. So what paperwork do we need to apply for these destinations? The immigration paperwork varies greatly based on the destination or the area that is being gone to. But typically, you need personal information, biographical information, birth certificates, and things like that. You need employment and corporate information. So if it's a visa for you to come in and manage a corporation or your own business here in the country, you have to provide the proof of that, your articles and bylaws and all the typical corporate documents that you need for anything like to open a bank account. You have to obtain a business license. You have to have what is the equivalent for foreign workers here in the United States of a Social Security number. It's called the federal. Well, there's the tax ID number, and then there's also the TIN, which is the individual supplement or substitute for the Social Security number. You have to provide the offer letter, or the contract that is the evidence of employment relationship, pay stubs that prove the salary that you'll be making because your financial qualifications are part of being able to stay in the country, evidence of transfer needs, the job description, so that if it's something that you're coming in and you're saying you're specialized in a particular job, you can prove by the job description that you qualify for that, and then any evidence of people that you'll be managing, subordinates here in the country. When do we start the process? Jennifer recommends as soon as possible. These visa lines, even for ones that don't have deadlines, are very lengthy. There are many people trying to get visas to come in, especially to work in the United States. And so if you want to bring in somebody to manage a program, if you want them here before your program is finished, you've got to really start the process right away, because it can take months and even up to years to prepare and receive a decision from the CIS. What are some resources that employers can go to when they are relocating their employees? Well, one is networks of international lawyers, which are local lawyers around the world. And the way you do that is you come to somebody like me, and we have relationships with firms in many other countries that can help to provide local assistance if necessary. SHRM is a society, it's a Society for Human Resource Management, which is a global human resources provider. SHRM has tremendous resources, and you get into their website, and they've got information on all aspects of HR that you might need assistance on, not just going back and forth across borders. ADP or other payroll companies can help, especially with the payroll and benefits side of things, if you have questions about how to manage that. Transitions Abroad is an organization that provides guides for people to understand about living and working overseas. Internations.org is an expat social and networking group with various information about different countries that they provide online. And then there are language programs as well, such as Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, the Beverly Hills Lingual Institute, Kaplan International, any of your local universities, that IVC or whatever that provide language training can do that. Another excellent source of information are the American Chambers of Commerce overseas. So if you're going to be looking at doing any business in the UK, get to know the British American Chamber of Commerce. If you're going to be working in Singapore or have someone from Singapore coming here, get to know the Singapore American Business Association, SABA. These are wealths of information, and people are always happy to talk to you. And so that's it. If you have any questions, please don't call me about immigration, but call Jennifer, and here's her information.